Hey, uplifters, welcome back. I'm Aranza Savas, and I'm so glad you are here today. Today's conversation is one I've really been looking forward to. Our guest book is honestly one of the most captivating things I've read in a really long time. One of those books that permeated every conversation I had while I was reading it. It actually took me a lot longer to read than expected because not because it wasn't great and not because I didn't want to like just pour through it, but because I had to stop reading like every 15 seconds to talk to my kids or my husband or whoever was with me about what I was reading. And it is just incredibly well written. The author is hilarious and smart and brave, exactly the kind of voice that I want in my head permeating my bubble, especially right now when the voices we're hearing tend to be so destructive and so alienating. This book, I was just like, I'm just going to put this on repeat and sleep with it so I can hear it again and again. And because you know what? When I'm around smart, brave people, I'm smarter and braver. And that is true for all of us. And there's an incredible body of research to validate that. So I want to introduce you to Sadie Dingfelder. Sadie is a longtime science journalist. She's written for the Washington Post, National Geographic, Wall Street Journal. She's covered neuroscience and cognitive science for the American Psychological Association. But today we're here to talk about her new book, Do I Know You?, which is a memoir meets reported science book about prosopagnosia, which I've also known, perhaps you have too, as face blindness. Researchers estimate about 1 in 50 people have some form of face blindness. And one of the things I discovered from this is that most people have no idea. Sadie discovered her face blindness at almost 40. And I think this is super relevant and super interesting for all of us in midlife because more and more research is showing that women are diagnosed with neurological differences later than men because we are really good at being resourceful and tolerating and being creative and figuring stuff out.
Yeah.
A quick intro to what we're going to talk about today. Sadie's book really is fascinating reporting on face blindness and stereo blindness. So you're going to hear a lot about that. But more than that, it's about what happens when our brain works differently than the world expects. And when we've spent our entire lives exhaustingly, quietly trying to figure out why. We're going to talk about memory, identity, what it means to understand your personal operating system, and what gets easier when you start working with the brain you have instead of trying to figure out how to work with the brain you expect. So, Sadie, welcome to the Uplifters. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. And I brought a copy of my book. It's called Do I Know You?
Yeah.
And there's also, it's in Italian now.
Ooh.
I got to go on an Italian book tour. That was really fun. And it's in Korean. They have
What?
not invited me to South Korea yet.
I mean, dear South Korea, please invite Sadie because she's super cool and her book is great. So Sadie, for folks who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, what was that moment when you were like, hey, wait, maybe my brain is different?
In retrospect, it feels like my life is one of those movies with a surprise ending that makes you rewatch the whole movie again. Um, those M. Night Shyamalan movies, because
Mhm.
in retrospect, it's glaringly obvious that I am not recognizing people a lot and making a lot of weird mistakes that neurotypical people don't make. But all the way up to, up to and mostly through age 39, I believed that I was basically neurotypical. And then I was grocery shopping with my now husband, a then boyfriend, and we were at the Safeway in DC, and I lost track of him for a second, and when I found him, he had just gone hog wild. He was filling our grocery cart with like all this junk food and generic grocery store brands, which he doesn't usually do. So I grabbed out a generic peanut butter jar and I brandished it like it was exhibit A in some sort of murder trial. And I said, since when do you buy generic? And Steve looked back at me and he just looked horrified. I actually like kind of glanced behind me to see what had terrified my like 400-pound husband. He's a big guy. This man was not Steve. He was a random Steve-shaped stranger. I look behind me. There's no one behind me. I look back at my boyfriend and his face actually like shifts in front of my eyes, almost like that Michael Jackson video morph sort of look. His features were actually sort of unstable on his face, and I realized it was not only was this not my husband, but I was having like a weird perceptual experience. And I was so embarrassed too. I just dropped the peanut butter and I ran off. No explanation, obviously. How do you explain that? Then when I found Steve for real and I told him what had happened, he said, yeah, that kind of thing happens to you all the time. And I thought, is that true? And when we were driving home, I was just thinking, you know what? I always thought of myself as story prone, which is to say, like, things happen to me. I immediately spin them into a funny story and then call up someone and tell it to them. And I just thought that, I don't know, I just thought that stories were attracted to me. I didn't realize that my entire life was this comedy of mistaken identity and sometimes tragedy of mistaken identity. So I get home, I'm supposed to be working on some other story for the Washington Post, but instead I start Googling face blindness because it's a term I had heard before from Oliver Sacks. Like I covered neuroscience and psychology, but it never occurred to me to apply any of what I learned to myself, right? I was like, I'm so interested in weird brains. Mine's totally normal. Boy, was I wrong. So anyway, this sent me down this research rabbit hole. I reached out to scientists and I got into studies and I learned that my brain is super unusual in a variety of ways. And scientists are very interested in throwing me into MRI machines and watching my brain work or not work. And so while I learned all this stuff about myself and I had to reframe my entire past, I was also learning a lot about how vision works and how memory works and how internal imagery is sort of generated. And I discovered two really cool things. Number one, scientists are taking subjective experience seriously for the first time since, I don't know, in 100 years, probably longer. So they're actually trying to see what it's like to be another person or what it's like to be another animal objectively. And I think that's so cool. And what they're finding is that there is so much variety. If you could beam into anyone else's head, you might be completely shocked at what their world literally looks like. Like if you beamed into my head, you would think, okay, everyone looks the same, like penguins on a penguin march. And also the world is very flat and I'm going to knock over that glass.
One of the, as you said, the penguins, it made me think about early on in the book, you talk about how we only recently read faces in our evolution for cues. And before we used to read butts. My kids thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it's chimpanzees and monkeys can tell each other apart just by their butts. And this researcher actually wanted to see if humans can do it too. So she got some highly depilated volunteers and took pictures of their anal genital regions and saw if people could tell them apart. And humans are not good at telling butts apart, but chimpanzees sure can. They can tell human butts apart.
Okay. Side note, I kind of love that from my personal story because I've always said that I have this really complicated relationship with my thighs and my butt.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this realization a few years ago that as much as I have denigrated hip shape, if you take a photo of my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, me, and my daughters, you see in a line 6 little butts not little butts, 6 big butts that all clearly belong together.
Oh, that's so cute.
Because our butts are a signature, man.
Yeah. I
would recognize someone as like, oh, are we related? If they had a butt like ours.
Right.
So there's some truth to it, but not about the blushing of our butts. We don't see each other's butts blush.
I'm dying to tell you something kind of gross that you might want to edit out.
Okay. Tell me, and
Okay.
I probably won't.
Okay. I just remember the other day I had like woke up and I had sort of unexpectedly got my period, because it's always unexpected for me because I don't keep track of time. But my sheets were totally fine. And so when I went to the bathroom and saw that my period had started, I thought, oh my God, those poor women with the thigh gaps, like they make huge messes. Like I was totally sealed and super no big deal. And so I thank my big thighs for that. And I would not trade them because that would be gross.
Well, and I think it's actually a really great segue here because one of the major themes of the book is really exploring what the advantages and disadvantages of your brain's differences are.
Yeah.
And I think, again, we all have different brains, as you said, and we all have advantages and disadvantages that we experience because of those. And we've had a woman on the show who works with the unhoused population who doesn't have a sense of smell.
Oh my
And
God.
it's been incredibly impactful to her success in her work because she doesn't experience that sense of disgust that our
Oh,
brains trigger from an evolutionary standpoint.
yeah.
And, many other women in this series have shared in different ways how their lived experience perfectly positioned them to be able to do something that nobody else could do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, not having a thigh gap has its own advantages. Thank
It
you
really
very
does.
much in big and small ways. But also being stereo blind and face blind have some advantages, but they also have a lot of challenges. So let's start with the challenges
Yeah.
to acknowledge that because there's some big stuff in there, kind of at every domain, physically,
Yeah.
mentally, emotionally.
It's so wild to me that these disabilities and differences that I didn't even realize I had have been quietly shaping my entire life and my personality, and my abilities. It's wild to me that I couldn't see it, you know? It was
Mm.
like a huge current in the ocean that was pushing me around and I had no idea. So I'm very bad at face recognition, I have learned. I'm in the bottom 2%. I was the worst person in this one study that like had recruited hundreds of face blind people. So to me, faces like really just all do
The
look
the
basically the
stat
same.
that stuck with me is you can see less than the average, what was it? Bonobo? Macaw? Macaw.
I'm on par with a below average macaque, according to one fantastic scientist. And so like that's actually a lot better than your average penguin, right? But I'm in the primate family at least. So I mean, I have failed to recognize myself in photos and in the mirror. I have failed to recognize my mom. It's funny because when you tell people you're face blind, they immediately, and this is totally cool, but they relate it to their own experience failing to recognize someone. And so I immediately have to jump to like the just how extreme apparently my experience is, because people will be like, oh yeah, I can always recognize myself or my mom. So growing up, I just had a lot of trouble making friends, and weirdly it hit at exactly 5th grade. I feel like maybe when you're younger you don't have to know who you're talking to or playing with that well. Every day I went to elementary school, it could have been a whole new set of kids, but who cared, you know? But around 5th grade, people start to care and they expect you to be able to recognize them if you hit it off one day at the playground. And they take it very personally if you ignore them the next day. And so I found myself being like a total outcast and being so lonely and sad. And I mean, and that basically continued almost all the way through high school, having maybe one best friend. And in retrospect, what's kind of funny is I realized that I always found a best friend who was very visually distinctive. I've had two best friends at different points in my life that have blue hair, and my husband is of course very large, you know, and a good friend of mine is very tiny. So you have to be an extreme person for me to recognize you multiple
I'm
times
gonna
and be
wear
able to
these
form a
glasses
friend.
every time I see you because they're
Thank you.
humongous.
Yeah, those are unusual glasses. And if you change your hair, your glasses, then you are just being mean to me, basically.
I'll reintroduce myself. So you
But
were
yeah,
finding
so
these ways to adapt.
yeah, and well, I just thought that I'm like, okay, like I'm a weird kid. People are mean. I didn't have any idea. It's like, so once I found out I was face blind, I posted on Facebook to my old classmates and I said, "Oh my gosh, I've just learned this about myself. Did anyone notice anything about me that was off?" And a bunch of people commented and said amazing things. Like this one girl said, We hit it off one time, but then you treated me like a stranger, and I just figured you didn't like me. So, I mean, again, I was so lonely. I was sitting by myself at lunch, at the bus. Like, I would have been best friends with anyone. I was not snobby. And people were throwing me these life rafts that I just like couldn't see or couldn't catch, you know? Oh, and another crazy thing that I realized in deep retrospect. So I've never been asked out by anyone, right? No one's ever asked me out on a date. I always do the asking. I feel like as a woman, especially a woman our age, this is like fairly unusual. And so I I just like was like, I guess it's a curse of my name. I'm like Sadie Hawkins or something. They expect you to ask them. But I found out that I don't want to say I've left a trail of confused suitors behind me, but I've left at least a few people who, again, like I would hit it off with, and then I'd treat them like a stranger, and people just get discouraged when you ignore them. And it seems pointed when I'm literally just not able to recognize that you were the same person that I hit it off with an hour ago, even.
Those kids saying, "Oh, I thought you weren't interested," or people
Yeah.
thinking that because you were face blind, you were snobby or standoffish or not interested in having friends,
Yeah.
when the opposite was entirely true.
I've learned so hard recently that my my suite of abilities is just not the same as most other people's, and we all assume that we other people do have the abilities we have, and that causes us to make assumptions like about all sorts of things, like, oh, you must be doing this on purpose, or you must be making a decision, or this is a character flaw, and you don't realize that sometimes it's just basic cognitive abilities. Anyway, so I was going to say, though, this is kind of a funny thing, is that growing up and walking around the world and having everyone seem to know who I was and I didn't know who they were, I sort of got the feeling that I was like mildly famous. Like, I didn't know why, but I really did like sort of think, yeah, that's just how it is with me, because I assumed everyone else had the same facial recognition abilities I do. And then alternatively, a really interesting, I have a friend who is a super recognizer, and he grew up thinking that he must be really unimportant to people and forgettable because he recognized all these people that had no idea who he was. So we are all just like sort of projecting ourselves into every other person we meet, and we're wrong, especially those of us who are quite neurodivergent. We're wrong almost 100% of the time.
Talk about how you adapted to it over the course of your life.
So when I was younger, before I went to college, my general adaptation wasn't great. I just sort of treated everyone like a stranger. When people would say hi to me, I would say hi and I'd scurry off, or, I'd be embarrassed or just mute. And my dad called me on it one day when I was home from college. So if you're a parent and you feel like your kids are ignoring everything you say, just know that sometimes something you say is like going to change their life. My dad doesn't even remember this happening, but I remember it. We were in this little grocery store, a little independent grocery store, and this, woman walked by and was like, "Hey, Sadie." And I was like, "Hey," which is apparently what my dad does, a good impression of me being like, "Hey." So I was like that. And then my dad, like at this car, said, why didn't you go and chat with your friend? You like, clearly like wanted to chat with you. And I said, "Oh, I have no idea who that was." And my dad said, and this was crucial, he said, "You don't have to know who someone is to have an amazing conversation with them. Just ask them questions about themselves and they will think that you are just fascinating." And I thought, oh my God, it's true. It's also kind of a lonely way to go through the world too, though, where you're just like, like not expressing yourself, but just asking people about themselves. But it really like it flipped the world for me, from being a world populated by strangers to being a world populated by friends. And I mean, I just was started treating literally everyone like they were my best friend, because they might be. And and this sort of skill of quickly connecting with people and just being sort of open and having an open face has been super helpful to me, my life as a reporter, because people just open up to me. And I think it's really lucky for me that people, I mean, when I was younger, I got a lot of like random marriage proposals from people because I would make eye contact and look like I was really interested in them. But I'm like, I'm sorry,
You're
I
like,
just do
"Ask
this.
me for a date first."
Yeah, you're right. You're right. you're right. I got marriage proposals, but no one asked me on a date.
Dude, they missed the memo. And so I think we hear in those adaptations, like, you were doing a lot of work to make this work. And
Yeah.
that work invested in other skills.
Yes. And actually, the most beneficial thing of being face blind, growing up face blind for me is a little amorphous. I think that I just developed this confidence in myself to figure out what is going on when I have no idea what is going on. So I feel confident that if you plop me into some weird situation, I will be fine and I will be able to figure out like what the dynamics are. And that is also a helpful reporter skill, but it's also just a helpful life skill because
Yeah.
we're always being plopped into the unknown. And since I've grown up just not necessarily knowing who I'm talking to, even it's kind of a basic thing. I've just sort of, I think, generalized that to other sources of uncertainty. And I remember on our wedding day, my whole wedding's a whole nother story, which is kind of fun, but my husband and I were waiting in our apartment to hear, like, Steve didn't know this. He thought everything was like planned, but we were waiting to hear from my friend where we were supposed to go. And so I was just like looking at my cell phone and Steve's like, shouldn't we be doing something? We're in our outfits, you know? And I'm like, he's like, where should we be going? And I'm like, I don't know yet. And he looked very alarmed. And I was like, what's the big deal? You know, we'll
They're
figure it
not gonna do it
out.
without us. Who would have, had a challenge at my wedding? My husband had a goatee the entire time we dated,
Huh?
and then as I walked down the aisle, he no longer had a goatee,
And that
and
was
he
a
was
surprise.
standing beside yeah, it was a total surprise. Standing beside his brother who doesn't have a goatee and looks just like him.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
like, "Which one am I marrying?"
Yeah, one should not shave. I had a boyfriend who shaved and I could not recognize him after he shaved. And also
Who
he was
are
like
you?
a lot less attractive. And I was like,
Interesting.
ooh, let's go back to the covering your face
Can
look.
we have
No,
the
I
first
didn't
one
say
back?
that. That would be terrible.
Honesty is not always the best policy.
Yeah.
No, I think this point about adaptation plays into something else I'm super curious about. I have a 17-year-old who we didn't test for autism, knowing that she had some sort of neurological difference her entire life, but we didn't test her until she was 17. And it turned out she had a lot of neurological differences because we sat in the space that I think so many people do, which is I feel like something's off, but is it going to be worse?
Yeah.
Is it going to be harder if I name it? And I think for her, like knowing has been incredibly advantageous. And I'm glad we didn't find out sooner because like I talked to people who are like, oh yeah, my kid was put down a different path because of those differences. And I've got a kid who thrived in general education. And had she been just automatically slotted into a special education platform, would she have been challenged in the same way?
Hmm.
But as we think about our audience here, who are many women in 40s, 50s, 60s, listening to this, thinking about like, well, I wonder if I'm face blind. I wonder if I have some sort of neurological difference. Should I find out or not? How
Right.
do you think about this on the heels of your own journey and all of your research?
I think about it all the time still because I don't think there's any answer that applies to everyone. It's situational. It depends a lot on when you live, right? Like in the 90s, I'm glad I didn't accumulate any labels. That wouldn't have been great for me. But today, actually, if someone had identified me as small child me as face blind, it might have been really helpful or definitely would have been helpful. So, yeah, I think that labels are such a double-edged sword. And it's also philosophical, right? Like it's like the know thyself question.
Yeah.
And so for me, if you're trying to kind of con your way through life, it's best for you to believe your own con. And there's tons of research showing this that if you are overconfident, not a huge amount of overconfident, but like 10 to 20% overconfident, then you will just do better because you believe in your own lies. And I think that that really got me through my entire life up to age like 39. And I feel like once I had sort of like done that, sort of work that sort of like grin and bear it, figure it out kind of thing for so long, it was really a relief to sit down and just think and be reflective and figure out all these things that I am abysmally bad at. But it's like it's sort of like I didn't let it weigh me down before because I just didn't accept that I was the bad. Or, you know what I really like to do is just devalue the skill. So, for instance, I can't catch a
Mm.
ball. And my entire life, I was like, who cares about that? Sports are dumb, So, and then another one would be like, you know, I can't spell at all. And I'm like, well, spelling's arbitrary. English doesn't even make any sense. So I think that I managed to like, but on the other hand, when you don't know yourself, then you can kind of hurt other people too. So this whole journey has made me like a lot more generous about my friends and family members and the different ways that they deal with problems that are so different from me. So another thing about me is I have no real autobiographical memory and I can't replay moments from my past. And so I would break up with someone and be like, okay, I'd be devastated for a week and then I would be fine. And as long as I hid all their pictures from myself, like it was pictures that were the problem, but my brain can't pull up pictures. So their memory would fade fast. And if I ran into them, like one time I ran into this guy who like totally cheated on me, very dramatic breakup. I ran into him on the street. He had a literal panic attack and I felt nothing. So it was quite a triumph. I know, right? But then
Yay for your brain.
I know that was so helpful for my brain. But the flip side of that is that I think that I can be a little slow to learn from experience because I've had several guys cheat on me in the past and have been completely blindsided every time. So if I let myself sit in that pain a little longer, maybe I could pull some insights out. But instead, I just, married the most honest person in the entire world, very transparent guy. So
Sounds like you learned.
yeah, but what I was going to say is my best friend Miriam, she just does not get over breakups. And I just thought that she was choosing to wallow in misery and indecision. And I didn't understand that she could actually replay like every moment of a relationship in her mind. And she can make up new scenes and live them in her mind, which kind of sounds fun. But
Yeah.
I can't do any of that. And so, but yeah, so learning that other people just have this inner life that's so different from mine and that they don't have a lot of control over has given me so much more insight into basically all other human beings.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, where we landed with Savannah is that it's been so much easier for everyone.
Yeah.
It's easier for us to understand where she's coming from. It's easier for her teachers to understand where she's coming from. She's giving herself more grace. And then beyond all of that, we're actually getting support that is targeted to her brain.
That's amazing.
And it takes like 10% of the effort.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think you're right. It's a double edged sword, but I saw that play out so keenly in your book. And I think at the end of the day, like my kids say constantly, they're like, I don't understand why 100% of the population isn't doing a neuropsych evaluation.
Oh, yeah. That would be great. We should. It would help everyone, even if you're highly neurotypical, straight down the middle. Actually, that's the only person who doesn't need to do it is the people who are like weirdly super average. But everyone's off of the mean in some direction.
Yeah.
Though I rankle a little bit when people say, is there any such thing as normal then? And I'm like, yes, there is a mathematical norm for every trait you can imagine. But also, in the aggregate, like there's a mathematical norm of that. You can take the average of the averages. And some people are just going to be out on the tails no matter what. Because if you are exceptional, quote unquote, or if you're an outlier on one trait, you're probably an outlier on another trait because your brain is all about trade-offs. And so, the average set of trade-offs that people make is sort of the neurotypical brain that most education is very geared towards. And so yes, there is definitely a bell curve of normal to neurodivergent. And I feel like if you're in the bottom 3% or top 3% in the club, not that like we need a hard and fast club or anything. I'm a big fan of what I like to call big tent neurodiversity.
Mm.
Because even though my brain is measurably unusual and 6 or 7 teams of scientists have gotten interested in studying it, and one woman just is getting her PhD like dissertation is entirely based on how I can't like find my way like around the neighborhood, because that's called developmental topographical disorientation. And it's weirdly common with people who are face blind, because you can also be place blind, which means that those two parts of your brain are right next to each other, place and face recognition. And so if you are bad at one, you're often bad at the other. And so a lot of face blind people, Oliver Sacks, what is her name, who recently died, Jane Goodall, who I email interviewed her for my book, and she said the most interesting stuff about face recognition. But she's super face blind, and both of those people would get lost all the time.
Interesting. And you also, we talked about it in the intro, but you're also stereo blind.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's the three-dimensionality of what you see.
Yes. And it's kind of wild because people don't realize how common stereo blindness or stereo deficiency is. In part because we do surgery on young children that makes them look normal to other people, but actually just hides their disability from themselves and other people. So like a lot of the stigma. So, okay. Yeah. I was born with eyes that were misaligned, and my brain couldn't learn to bring them into alignment. And this is, pretty common. It's called strabismus or amblyopia. And you can treat it a lot of the time with patching, which is super weird. By the way, the treatment for amblyopia / strabismus has not progressed in, I want to say, like 250 years. Like the patching is still the best we have. And it does work for a lot of people, though a lot of times those kids still end up quite stereo deficient, but not usually totally stereo blind like me. So I got 2 eye surgeries to sort of forcibly yank my eyes back into alignment. And what I've learned, and as I've grown older, of course, they've grown apart. They're like a bad marriage, like they've drifted apart. But what I've learned is that there's all this terminology that says like, oh, your eye is lazy. You have a lazy eye. But your eye is actually not lazy. Your brain is intentionally turning that eye away from the other eye, where the other eye is pointed, turning it towards your nose or towards the wall, so that it can more easily ignore the information, so you don't see double. And so that's why you often need multiple surgeries, because every time your brain is fighting what the surgeons are doing. And anyway, so it's this weird situation, because having a visible neurological disorder is extremely stigmatizing. And there's not a great alternative either. So I don't know. It's like this thing I always want to tell parents, and then I don't want to tell them because it just leaves them with too much information that they can't take action on. Today, there are some new VR-based treatments that help teach kids to bring their eyes into alignment using their brain, not instead of just physically yanking their eyes into alignment, by playing video games and watching movies. So I tried it, and I actually did get a lot better, but I did not get past the threshold of being like, I'm still considered pretty stereo blind.
And you found that out well after finding out you were face blind.
Yes. It's so, I mean,
it's like a series of doors you went through. It wasn't just one thing.
Yeah. And I think this is a really, like, having a pure version of a syndrome, like if you're a pure, like, that only happens if you've had a brain injury, usually. If you have a developmental version of prosopagnosia or a whole variety of other things, if it's been baked into your whole brain, it's set off a cascade of differences. And so on one hand, my brother is like, are you just collecting diagnoses now? And I feel like I kind of am, right? But on the other hand, it's like, actually, the problem is with, it's just that there are these labels, and if you qualify for one, you probably qualify for 10 more, and that's not about you, the person, that's about our labeling system not being very good. Yeah. And so I think labels are tools, and if they help, use them, and when they don't help, drop them.
Yeah. Well, there's a part in the book where you talk about the midlife happiness curve.
Yes. I'm so obsessed with that.
Same. And you relate it to a decision to operate not just around your weaknesses and to play to your strengths, but to develop the weaknesses or the things that were harder into new strengths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little about that, because I think there's something in that for any midlife woman.
When I started this book, I kind of wanted it to be an amazing tale of neuroplasticity. Like, I wanted to learn how to recognize faces. I wanted to learn to see in 3D. I wanted to learn to visualize and remember my own life. And I just did not succeed on any of these things. Spoiler alert. I could sometimes, with intense training, start passing tests, but it didn't often generalize to real life. And so what I ended up doing instead is learning all of these things about my brain and learning just to work with my brain instead of trying to hide my deficits, and just like being upfront with other people about my deficits. But also so I think a thing about younger Sadie is that was very I still am like very goal oriented and can be like so focused on goals, and I have tried to develop a whole new side of myself, which is being process oriented and playful and enjoying the journey instead of just trying to hit the marks. And I think that is maybe more than anything going to help me get happier over time.
Yeah, and do you wanna share a little of the data on the happiness bell curve for people who aren't
Yeah,
familiar?
it is this wildly robust finding in psychology. We had a replication crisis in psychology where a lot of our most important studies turned out not to be replicatable. But this one has been replicated. And basically, it's the U shaped happiness curve where when you're born, you're quite happy. You're just happy to be here. And then your happiness like descends down this U slope. And then about midlife, it starts going up again. Thank goodness. So most people are most unhappy at around like 45, I feel like. I'm 46. So I hope I'm on the upslope now. But I think that what's wild about this to me is like, you can control for socioeconomic status, for gender, for family responsibilities. You find this across human cultures, uncontacted cultures, and even apes like chimpanzees and bonobos. Also, if you have their zookeepers rate them on how happy they are, they also follow the same curve, though their midlife is a little earlier than ours because they don't live quite as long. So yeah, it's kind of a mystery in psychology. Like, does that mean that chimpanzees know how long their life is? Like, do they have some sense of that? And no one really knows like why we start getting happier once our lifespan starts shrinking. I don't know what happens. No one knows.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a meta-analysis that was done by an Australian team last year, and
Uh-huh.
they released their findings in the journal Intelligence because they were really looking at intelligence factors as they relate to age. And so they looked at sort of the 16 core personality traits,
Mm-hmm.
and they find that those actually, even though we've often ascribed peak intelligence to people in their 20s and 30s by looking at things like chess champions and physicists, like major breakthroughs. What you really see is that it is in later life that we peak across not raw processing power, because that does slow down,
Yeah.
but across measures of intelligence. And when they were normalized and measured across these studies, it's actually that we get smarter, and our personality becomes more fixed. So there's less doubt and anxiety, I think, clouding our perspectives. And the whole, like, we see so much now about women giving fewer fucks in midlife.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is really just like, okay, I know enough to know that the whole world is crazy. And so I'm just going to like care less about things that don't matter and focus my attention on what does, and greater sense of like purpose. I
Yeah.
think at least in women who I've done most of my work with, I think we see just such a huge increase in emphasis on purpose versus productivity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Cool.
that's what I correlate it with, at least in the women I talk to who are American women. So it's not nearly the sample size that these other researchers are looking at.
So
Um,
I'm so curious, like am I allowed to interview you? I was just curious, like what got you interested in behavior change and like what the most surprising thing you've learned from interviewing all these people who have made midlife pivots.
oh my gosh, you're so sweet to ask. Honestly, it's the only thing I've ever been interested in. I'm a very one-dimensional person, and I like only care about what people are thinking about and how their brains work and their desires, and like everything else. I can't talk about the weather, and I can't talk about politics very well, and I can't like I'm bored talking about pretty much everything else. So
Yeah,
when I
I feel the
started
same
working
way.
with behavioral scientists, I was like, oh my gosh, I found my people because that's all I've been thinking about. And now there's science to back it up. And so, yeah, I spent almost 20 years at Weight Watchers working with behavioral scientists and designing behavioral interventions. And since then, I have pivoted that because of my own lived journey, my family, myself, to talking to midlife women and writing about that. That's the shortest summary I can give of it, but it's my nerd verse. And you are so in my nerd verse, and that makes me so happy.
Wild.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
like, what
please.
is the instinct? What's the spark that allows you to actually change something big about yourself? It's kind of mysterious. It's like your brain is changing itself, and yeah, you get this into these recursive thought loops that don't go anywhere.
Right. You talk about wanting this to be a hero's journey for your neural pathways and proof of neuroplasticity. And while you don't suddenly have super recognizer powers,
Yeah.
um, you have developed so many new skills through your exploration, and you have retrained your neural pathways through this. And that, I think, is just, it's really encouraging. I want to collect stories about this stuff because I think it helps us all believe in our capacity for
Yeah.
change, to see other people do it.
Yeah, there's a reason why humans live this long, right? We need a lot of time to figure out how to be a human because it's really, really hard. The thing that self-knowledge has brought me. So people always ask, like, are you better at face recognizing now that you know that you're so bad at it? And I'm gonna say I might be worse, right? I might be a little bit worse at face recognizing because maybe I'm not even trying. I'm like, well, I can't do this. But I use technology like crazy. So whenever I'm meeting a new group of people that I'm going to be seeing often, I'm like, listen, this is just for me. I'm not going to post it online, but I am going to take everyone's picture and I'm going to start taking notes on you. Because a wild thing about being face blind is that you often can't hold on to information about other people. So you're always, even if you do recognize this is the person you saw before, you can't remember that she has 2 kids, and so you're just always stuck at the let's talk about the weather level of conversation. So I learned this about myself and I'm like, I just thought I might be an asshole. Like, not because like I'm one of my best friends, Lee. I hope she doesn't listen to this, but like I know she has 3 brothers. I don't know which is which. I don't know how old they are. Like, and I can't name them. And I feel bad about it, but I do have that information in my phone now. Like, so, and all my friends' kids and their birthdays are in my phone. So I can just like know their names at least. And yeah, so I'm really enjoying this technological sort of hack to being face blind and having just the worst memory for facts in isolation.
I think it's brilliant, right? And we all probably have opportunities to do that, to reduce some of the static, right? Like you talk about in the book how when you were trying to remember all of that stuff unassisted and without this knowledge, it was like impossible to listen to people.
Yeah.
And so you made it easier on yourself to clear the static and to reduce the friction and to focus on what matters. Going back to the like fewer fucks about what doesn't and more fucks about what does.
Yeah. You know what? You just gave me an idea. I think I'm going to carry around like little name tags and just slap them on people because it really would help. Like it helps, neurotypical people can get that face to name connection after 1 or 2 repetitions, but I start to feel dumb asking again and again. So I'm going to carry around name tags because
Yeah, I think you should put like a QR code for your book on it too. And then
yeah,
it's like
I
a
totally
marketing
will.
tool.
So I can be like, listen, there's proof. There's a Washington Post article. There's several papers written about me at this point. I'm not making this up. I am.
And also buy the book.
Yeah, and please buy my book, or you can
I'm
do that.
invested in people buying your book.
Thank you, thank you.
Seriously, not just because it's a really good book, but I feel like invested in people reading it because I think we all need to show each other more grace.
Yeah,
And I think we all can make life a little bit easier for each other and all feel more at home in this world.
yeah, and I am
And
by the
you
poster
show us
child.
how.
Yeah, I got to say, like, I'm the poster child for not doing that. So it has been like a 180 for me to, like, I have like a very good memory for music. I can play violin by ear. And when people were impressed by that, I'm like it's hard. And then I'm a terrible violin teacher because I can't I'm like, why is this hard? Just do this, So it's been a huge revelation for me.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And we're all guilty of it, I think is what I'm remembering as you say it. Like, no matter how
Great
aware we are.
philosophers. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone does it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you wrote this book. For anybody listening, I'm sorry. There's probably 80 more questions you have for Sadie that I didn't ask. So when we release the episode, go to Substack, comment on the episode. Sadie's on Substack. There'll be a link to her Substack where she's writing about these things. I'll share it on my Substack and we can chat about it in the comments, which is the most fun part of this, because then you can ask her all the questions I meant to ask her, but then I was just so excited to be talking to her and so excited to be talking about this topic that I probably didn't get to 90% of it. But also I want to respect everybody's time, and not make you listen to a 14-hour episode because I want one.
Those chat podcasts, oh my God, they're like 3 hours.
I can't. I have a very short attention span. But truly, the book is so good. And it took a lot of courage to write it. You wrote it in a very brave way. So one of the things we talk about here is raising courage capital. And what I mean by that is that we all know that we need money and other obvious resources to do big, brave things. But we really need is the courage to get out there and do them. And I was so moved by the level of courage that you demonstrated and the way that you wrote this. And I feel more courageous in my work after having read it. So thank you.
Thank you. You know what's funny? Quick, I was so worried when I was writing my book because I write about ex-boyfriends, I write about my friends, and I was worried that everyone was going to hate me when my book came out. No one reads your books. Like my ex-boyfriend, who makes up a huge part of my book, who in the book is named Neil. I met up with him in Boston and he had not read the book. And I'm like, you're in there and you haven't even read it? But anyway, so fellow memoirists, no one reads anymore, so put down what you want.
I love that. I love that. So 2 things we do in every episode. The first is that every guest is nominated by another guest.
Ooh.
And isn't that fun? Which means I
Yeah.
get to meet all these amazing women. So who would you like to nominate as an uplifter?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. My friend Jessica Hansen, she is she was my second voice coach who fixed the problems that my first. Yeah. Anyway, you're going to love her. She's so creative. And she used to be NPR's in-house voice coach, but I think her position got eliminated, but her life is even awesomer now. So she's an amazing midlife pivot story, I think.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk to Jessica. And as uplifters, we love to uplift other uplifters. I think about it as a cyclical impact. So you, through creating this book, through sharing your time and your story today, have given us so much of your accumulated wisdom and experience to work from. What can we do as a community for you to uplift you?
I just love your whole thesis. You know the Lizzo line that's like, if I'm shiny, everybody is gonna shine? It's just
I
such a
love that.
good,
Yes.
because it's we're not in competition with each other, guys. We're all on the same team. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, if you read my book and if you enjoy it, leave a review on Goodreads or on Amazon. That makes such a big difference. You wouldn't believe what a big difference that makes. So yeah, thank you. And if you don't like it, don't leave a review.
For real. Send it via text to someone else if you must, but don't post it.
No, really. I mean, if you don't like it, you can also leave a review. But yeah, reviews are amazing.
Yeah. Similarly, rate and review this podcast.
Yeah.
It has been such a delight. Thank you, Sadie. I'm so glad our paths crossed, and I am so excited to stay connected.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet you in real life.
Thanks for watching the Uplifters podcast. If this inspired you, hit subscribe and tap the bell to stay uplifted. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a little lift today. Big love.
Painted water sunshine with rosemary and thyme. Dwell in the perplexing, though you find it vexing. Toss a star and hover, be your own best lover. Relish in a new prime. Plant a tree in springtime. Dance with idle hindsight. Bring the sun to twilight.